Hello, and welcome to the second in our webinar series that's going to explore what agencies can do to ensure a successful implementation of the new FTA PTASP rule. My name is Steve Severson, and along with my co-presenter Dick Faderly, we lead OTB Solutions Transit Practice, and we're management consultants who specialize in helping organizations get the most out of their technology and their process improvement investments. And we've done quite a few gap analyses over the years and wanted to share with you some of our leading practices, biggest lessons learned, and general advice for doing a gap analysis. So before Dick gets into the content, just a few logistics to get out of the way. First of all, we will be recording this and we'll send it to all of you, so don't worry if you have to miss a minute of it. We're hoping to run through the content in roughly 25 minutes to allow for a formal Q&A session at the end. The audio set up for participants, but there is a Q&A feature in the webinar service that we encourage you to take advantage of throughout the presentation. It's just to the right of where the slides are shown if you click on the tab that says Q&A. If you don't see a sidebar to the right of the slides, you might have to click the little blue chat box on the lower right corner of your screen to pop it open. And I'll do my best to answer all of your questions as I come across them, and I'll share any that I think might be relevant for others in that section as well, so be sure to keep an eye on it. If I come across any that I think will be better for everyone to hear the answer to, I may hold on to it until the end, and then we can answer them out loud for everybody during the formal Q&A session. We'll also be asking a few poll questions of you all throughout the presentation, so look out for those. We'll share the results with everyone after the webinar as well, and you can also see them in real time over in the poll section in that same sidebar to the right. Last but not least, we have a 5-minute multiple choice survey around PTASP and SMS readiness that we'd love for you guys all to fill out for us if you have time. For those who attended our prior webinars, it's the same survey, so no need to fill it out again. But we will share those survey results as well as our deck with anyone who takes this survey. So keep a lookout for that link at the conclusion of the webinar. So I think that's everything. With all that out of the way, I think we're going to get going. So I'll hand things over to Dick Faderly to get started.
Thanks, Steve. You know, we know that there's a lot for everyone to get done, and that some of you are probably well on your way to going through the process of figuring out what you need to do to satisfy the PTASP rule and to implement your own safety management system. But what we wanted to talk to you about is kind of our thinking around a good approach to accomplishing all the stuff that needs to be done that we've put together, and as Steve mentioned, that we've used this kind of methodology very successfully before. So what we wanted to do was go through a little bit of background, kind of some thinking on why you want to do a gap analysis other than just the fact that it is certainly what the FTA recommends as a way to start. And also a way that we've kind of rearranged the pillars and the components, if you will, that we think can help you think through the process of performing the gap analysis. Then we'd like to go through what our approach has been in the past and what we're using now in this area, and some of the deliverables and next steps that we think would come out of an activity like this, and then kind of tying it all together at the end. So, you know, we all know that the rule was published, but some of us were caught a little bit by surprise based on the current administration's focus on making sure that rules don't have a negative impact in terms of costs. There might be a delay in the implementation of this rule. The fact that there wasn't, I think, speaks really strongly to the fact that really a safety management system isn't about layering in costs and compliance. It really is about reducing costs by reducing the safety incidents that are out there. You know, really a safety management system is all about reducing the cost associated with safety failures. You know, example of where a safety management system might have avoided a significant event happened right here in Seattle. I think you probably are all aware of it. It's the incident where the mechanic who worked for the company that was providing maintenance for Alaska Airlines flew off with a plane. You know, preliminary reports indicate that several people had mentioned some things that might have brought him to the attention of people who could have done something. And also that maybe if a safety management system was in place, they could have done the threat or hazard analyses that would have identified the particular risks here. But right now, and particularly when this incident happened, airports aren't required to have that kind of a safety management system in place. And it's possible that by having that kind of a safety management system in place, this whole affair might have been avoided. There is a rule in the works that is looking at something around safety management systems for airports, and I think that's a really good thing. You know, this is all a what if, but we do think it is illustrative of the potential benefits of a robust safety management system. You know, as we've said in our earlier webinars, all of this has to be knitted together, but a strong safety culture throughout the agency is really critical to successful implementation. But really it all boils down to there's just a lot to do between now and July of 2019, and even more to do between now and July of 2020. So, you know, the FTA has provided a lot of really good supporting materials, including templates for your agency, safety plan, and a supporting reference guide. Though, if you dig into it, there is still lots and lots of stuff that you need to do to make it real. The reference guide in particular is helpful in figuring out why you have to do something, and the kinds of things that the FTA and the safety oversight organizations will be looking at in your plan to make sure that you're doing certain things. But it's important to realize that it isn't prescriptive. It doesn't really tell you how much about what you need to do, nor does it go into anywhere on how you need to do it. You know, we've alluded to this in our other presentations as well, but we think this is a good thing. This does let you tailor the plan to meet the needs of your ridership, your staff, and your community. And as we noted before, one size does not fit all. So really, a gap analysis is a structured method to get yourself organized, to make sure that you're considering every transportation agency safety plan requires of you, and to ensure that when you think you're done, you are done. Ultimately, you need to answer all of the questions on the right, and there are multiple approaches to getting a gap analysis done. You know, an example of where a structured approach to doing a gap analysis could have identified some of the things that might have gone wrong is the healthcare.gov launch. You know, we're all pretty familiar with it. It was obviously in the press for quite some time. But two of the key findings of an analysis of why this launch failed pointed to two things: a lack of relevant experience and a lack of leadership. Identifying this kind of thing is exactly what a structured gap analysis is designed to do. When you're doing a gap analysis, you're specifically looking at what your requirements are and where you think your gaps are. It's possible, but there's no guarantee that the shortcomings that were identified in the healthcare.gov launch could have been known up front, and that a mitigation plan could have been put in place to address these issues. So right now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Steve and have him ask a polling question.
Thanks, Dick. The first polling question is a pretty straightforward one. We're just wondering who's planning on doing a gap analysis and who isn't sure. Great, it looks like a few have not started, a few are in progress. A couple aren't sure if they're going to do it or not. Hopefully we'll convince you that it's a good idea. And no one is done already, which I don't think is very surprising.
Thanks, Steve. You know, I've mentioned that the FTA has a number of really good tools out there. One of the ones that they reference and that you can find on the DOT site is the FAA gap analysis tool. You know, we think it's a really good tool for you all to look at. And safety management systems really have their root with the FAA back in the 80s. You know, we all know that airline safety events are way less frequent now than they used to be. And this is directly attributable to the implementation and, just as importantly, continuous improvement of their safety management systems. Like I said, the tool that's out there is really good for agencies to look at, but it needs some fairly serious refitting. And it's also a really good bit of work, but at the end, you need to translate it into the plans and your future state deliverables. It's a framework, but the hard part of all of this is the real content. You know, it isn't something that someone can just fill out. It needs a process, and it needs lots of input from subject matter experts in your organization. You know, this really is a hefty lift, and you can't just give it to some engineer to do on top of their regular day job, or we don't think that that's a particularly successful way for you to accomplish all the stuff that you need to do. You know, as I said, we've been looking at the pillars and the components and had a different kind of visual that we wanted to go through with you. But really what this is, it's about a framework that still revolves around the 4 pillars. So there's still safety management, safety risk management, safety assurance, and the safety promotion piece that you still have to have. All of these, and obviously all the components, are fundamental to the launch of your successful safety management system. But really what we wanted to call out was the fact that these are all interrelated. And one of the things that I wanted to point out on this particular slide was the way that we've structured the pillars and the components of the PTASP safety management system is we've put documentation and records, one of the components of a safety management system, as the central hub of your multi-spoked SMS. We think it's a core component of all the other components of your SMS. It's also how we approach the gap analysis. So when we look at it overall, after the components and after their alignment with all of the different pillars, we think that having a set of tools out there to support all of the different kinds of things that you need to look at is a really important thing for you to consider. You know, this is not meant to be comprehensive, nor is it meant to be prescriptive. You know, we've said it in this webinar and we've said it in our others, one size does not fit all. Each agency needs to figure out for itself what it has already and what it needs for the future. So really it's about taking that view and understanding what your gaps are. We think that by rearranging the pillars and components in this way, it helps to make clear how each of these components relates to and supports the other components of a safety management system. As you implement your safety agency plan, we also think that this is a great way for you to organize your thinking on how to approach your gap analysis. This analysis will help you identify what gaps you have, and ultimately it should help you decide in what order you need or can close them. The resources that you need to involve, people, money, technology, everything else, and how long it's going to take you to do all of this. But remember, you can't do everything at once. Not only should you not try to boil the ocean dry in your efforts to be thorough, but this isn't a once and done effort. We think you need to look at this as an iterative process, and that you need to launch early and often and learn from those as you adapt your efforts. This should be considered a part of your continuous improvement process. You know, unfortunately, you can't download an SMS plan off an app or go buy the book and put it on the shelf. Because of this, the reason it needs to be your plan, it needs to be your safety management system. And as we've said, it needs to be right-sized to your organization. You know, we think there's a risk in working with consultants, even though we're consultants. You risk them developing something for you that you don't own. That risks not being adopted by your agency because it doesn't really align with your culture, your values, your community and needs. But one of the other risks involved is if you have this done by internal resources, there's the possibility that they're going to be viewed as biased, that they're going to have either an axe to grind or that they weren't particularly realistic about areas that they may have a particular vested interest in. So there's a tug and a play between these kinds of competing demands. We've developed an approach to address these concerns. We facilitate you through this process. It's your evaluation, leveraging our tools and approach, but ultimately it's your deliverables that are facilitated by us. We want you to notice that it really consists of 3 key steps. First, we interview key stakeholders and walk you through an application survey and a survey of all of the things that you have in place and that you think you're missing. Second, we work with you through a rapid assessment session to gain consensus on your component assessment. Third, we do the gap analysis and the implementation plan that falls out of this whole process. So before I go on to the next section, we wanted to ask you another polling question.
Thanks, Dick. Yeah, we were just wondering what your guys' planned approach was to meeting this deadline. Whether you're mostly thinking of having an internal resource, whether you're thinking of hiring new people, or whether you're thinking of going with an external resource such as a contractor. And it looks so far like most people are trying to go with internal resources, which can be a great strategy. You just have to watch out a little bit for those pitfalls that Dick was talking about earlier.
Thanks, Steve. So when we look at a gap analysis, we really think that there are a couple of deliverables that you all should consider, and specifically they're deliverables that we create in our gap analyses. So it's really about those findings during interviews, the stakeholder interviews, and the component assessments. And then from that kind of the gap summary, understanding what your early opportunities are and what your highest risk areas are. And from that kind of stuff, you can create your implementation plan, understand the tasks that you need to complete, the resources that you need to assign to them, how much effort, how much money, all those other kinds of factors. From that, you can quickly see how you can update your agency safety plan and identify either the tools that you already have, the tools that you need, or anything else that you need to make this a successful implementation. If we kind of look at it to the next layer down, the next peel of the onion, in this approach, as we've outlined, we begin with the interviews for each of the components. And we complete the component assessment that we've got an example of up on the screen right now. But really what we're looking at is the individual components and understanding them across a couple of different dimensions. We want to understand the processes that you already have in place. What kinds of cultural aspects may impact these particular requirements, the kinds of technology that you do or don't have in place, and how you're managing the associated documentation. But also there's a clear recognition that just because the rule got promulgated back in July of this year doesn't mean that you weren't already doing some of these things already. So we want to understand some of the things that you already have in flight, and specifically what the FTA requirements are around this. So from that, we can identify your gap and rank it in terms of how important it is to close, how difficult it is to close, and how much of a cultural impact it is to close. So from that, each of the individual components, we need to then turn around and kind of do a roll-up. So you can turn around and see, after you've done this analysis for each one of the components, what your overall position is. Kind of a gap summary so you can understand what it is that you've ahead of you. With that, as we've mentioned, you can turn around and understand what your highest value items that are the lowest cost. We're consultants and we love the 2x2 quadrants. So in the upper right-hand quadrant, that helps you understand what are the things that you can pick off right away and maybe not impact resources or cultural changes as heavily and just get those things done. But you still need to worry about all these other kinds of gaps and how you're going to close them and how they relate to one another. And from that, you can develop the precedence diagram that we're referring to in the middle icon that you see. Once you understand what you need to do, the order that they need to be done in, how complex they are, how much they cost, and everything else, you can develop your project plan from that. And very specifically, you need to include your resourcing and your budget, because all of this obviously needs to be approved and needs to be done. So really, we think it's about kind of pulling all of this together and understanding what the pieces are that you need to support your agency. We do have a perspective on how this knits together, where the tools and technology can help, and how you can organize things in a way that's intuitive and fits the way your agency thinks and operates. So we've helped other organizations do just this kind of thing. But the thing that you need to consider, like we've been saying all along, that one size does not fit all. So you need to make sure that the tools, the processes, and the other supporting things that you have a need for fit within the needs, the capabilities, and the culture of your agency. You can kind of think of all the different kinds of tools and the way that you implement them as a continuum or a maturity model, if you will. As you move to the right, it's really about reducing the costs, improving the accuracy, the transparency, and the other aspects that we have listed on this slide. But again, whichever tools you use and how you choose to implement them, it needs to be aligned with your culture and size to fit your needs. So before I go on to the next phase of the presentation, we wanted to ask you another polling question.
So last one, we were just wondering, what level of automation are you guys striving for your SMS? So is this would you imagine this as continuing to be a manual process, or would you prefer to have a high level of automation and technological involvement, or kind of more of just a medium to low level of that? Great, so we have pretty much a lot of highs and a few people who are not sure. So that's great. We are definitely big fans of using technology to help you with this for all these reasons that are listed on the slide. It is just important to remember that you need to be right-sized and not, if you don't need a highly complex system, you don't need to go too big.
Thanks, Steve. So really, how long is this going to take? Typically we see that a gap analysis takes somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks. Getting the right people scheduled and everything else, it could take you as little time as a week, or it could take a couple of months. It really depends on your ability to staff it, and just as importantly, the complexity of your organization and the number of different stakeholders involved. But regardless of those particular factors, we think that your gap analysis really needs to be done by the first quarter of 2019. And even if it bleeds over into the second quarter, all of it obviously has to be completed in time for you to complete your plan by July of 2019. And everything, all of the tools, all of the training, all of the processes, documentation, and everything else needs to be up and running by July of 2020. So really that boils down to, you do have a lot to do, and you really need to start now. We can help. We can help with the gap analysis. We can help you with the tools. We can help you with the plan. If our approach is interesting to you, we'd like to encourage you to reach out to Jared, who organized this webinar for us, and we'd love to show you more. We'd also like you, as we said, to take the survey if you haven't already. And now I'm going to hand it over to Steve so we can open it up to Q&A.
Thanks, Dick. I'm going to send out the offer for the survey, and if you click on that, it's just going to take you to the survey in a new tab. And in the meantime, we can do Q&A as people work on that. Again, if you've already taken it, please don't take it again, because that'll mess up our data. But if you haven't taken it, please do. It's a really simple one. So the first question I'm seeing here, Dick, is someone's asking if we have an example of someone implementing the types of technology that you were talking about successfully, particularly within the transit industry.
Sure. Let me kind of go back, I think, to this slide. Yeah, definitely. So we've done this work for a number of different agencies. I think one of the ones that speaks really well to this kind of an approach is work that we've completed for an agency up here in the Pacific Northwest called Sound Transit. So we've helped them with safety and security certification, vehicle certification, any number of the different kinds of aspects of both from the construction side and all the way into the revenue operations side. So they're leveraging those kinds of technologies and are also using that to manage now their approach to their overall SMS documentation requirements, safety performance monitoring, and all of the other aspects. We have good examples with Sound Transit and some of the other agencies that we've worked with on how it is that we can not only leverage tools that we're aware of, but make sure that they're integrated into the tools that you already have. And we think that one of the most important aspects of looking at technology as a platform, if you will, is there's been a lot of changes over the past months and years on how technology is provisioned, how much it costs, what kinds of resources you need to maintain it and develop it. We strongly encourage you all to look at the no code and configure to order kinds of solutions that are out there. The kinds of things that you can do and the integration that you can accomplish has really rapidly changed, like I said, over the past 18 months. And we would also strongly encourage you to look at cloud deployments. Rather than diverting your valuable internal IT resources to managing yet more infrastructure, we would strongly encourage you all to consider looking at platform as a service, software as a service, and those other kinds of approaches. Thanks, Steve.
Great. So I see one more question here. Someone was asking, in our previous work on gap analysis, what are some kind of common pitfalls that we should watch out for? And what do people need to worry about if they're taking on a gap analysis for themselves?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to those, I think, a little bit earlier, and kind of our approach to that. Let me kind of get back to that slide. I think one of the most common, as I mentioned, is that potential conflict or perception of a conflict of having the internal resource who works for, let's say, the SQA group, or works for operations, or works for whatever, that there's the risk of a gap analysis being done by one of those individuals as being seen as biased. So there's value in involving outside or clearly seen individuals or groups who are unbiased by the organization, whether that bias perception of bias is true or not. Another risk is, and this one we see all over the place, is, this is a big set of work. It isn't that this is all every transit agency and everything else, but there is a very large cultural shift that needs to happen. There's a whole bunch of piece parts that you all need to think about very carefully as you're going through this. And having this as, either a part-time job of a number of people or a full-time job of one person opens you up to the possibility of just not having enough time to get all this stuff done and not being able to resource it appropriately. It really does depend on the size and complexity of your agency and the number of stakeholders and all these other things that I've alluded to. We're all used to working in matrix organizations and on multiple things at the same time. But in the meantime, all the other stuff, all those other projects that your agency is working on, whether it's building out new capacity or maintaining and bringing up to snuff all of the stuff that you already have in place, or whatever it happens to be, really will compete for the time that you'll find necessary to do this kind of work.
Cool. So last call for questions. I don't see any more right now. So if you have one, please type it in Q&A as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I'm just going to pop up a link if anyone would like to talk more with us. You can just click on that and it'll take you to our landing page. You just have to type in your email, and that'll be the best way to talk to us. You can also just send Jared an email at the email address that you've seen, or just call him up on the phone. I want to remind everyone that in the handout section, we have a couple of things that you can download and take back with you, one of which is the, we call it the bullseye diagram that we've been showing this whole time. That kind of is an introduction to the piece parts that you might think about for your gap analysis. And then we also I found a case study that we'd written up for Sound Transit. So if you want to know more about that, feel free. And you guys should all get that within a week at the very latest, hopefully before. Thanks everyone for attending. We really appreciate your time, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to talk to us more.